Patrick Roy hoists the Stanley Cup after the Montreal Canadiens beat Wayne Gretzky and the Los Angeles Kings in 5 games in 1993. John Mahoney, the Gazette We are now so far removed from the last Stanley Cup parade along the usual route that an entire generation of Montrealers has grown up without knowing the giddy euphoria that comes with a championship season. It's a pity, because winning titles was once as much a part of life here as municipal corruption and the cross on Mount Royal. I arrived in this city in January 1971, in time for one of the most brutal winters in Montreal history, and by May of 1979 I had witnessed 6 Stanley Cup parades, so many that we had our usual spot on St. Catherine Street, between Mackay and Bishop. We would wait there for the first floats to arrive, then trail along with the players to Peel and beyond. What always struck me was that at a time of year when most people had healthy tans, the triumphant Canadians were always pale as ghosts and covered with welts and bruises on their faces, necks and arms. The Stanley Cup parade was the usual thing in this unusual city, and it remained so until 1993, 25 years ago this spring. A quarter century, a long, thirsty time to go without a drink from the cup. In discussing the '93 triumph with old pals Stu Cowan and Pat Hickey for HIO last week, however, I was forced to consider some revisionist history. First, although it's often referred to as a miracle cup, the 1993 championship was won by a very solid team. The Canadiens were fortunate to get Buffalo and the Islanders in the second and third rounds rather than Boston and Pittsburgh, and lucky to duck the Chicago Blackhawks and the Pat Burns Maple Leafs in the final, and they were lucky to win an incredible 10 straight overtime games, a record that will never be broken. There was more than luck involved. The Canadiens had leadership in Guy Carbonneau and Kirk Muller, up front scoring with Vincent Damphouse, Brian Bellows and John Leckler, a young, talented and deep defense core, and the best money goaltender ever to play the game in Patrick Roy. This was a 102-point regular season team, not an 88-point also ran like their opponent in the final, the Los Angeles Kings. Story of that '93 team, and how it was frittered away, is in many ways the story of the Canadiens in the past half-century. When I said on HIO that the beginning of the end for the Canadiens was the trade that sent Patrick Roy and Mike Keane to Colorado, for Jocelyn Thibault, Martin Ruchinsky and Andrei "The Russian Tank" Kovalenko, Pat Hickey disagreed and pointed to the series of disastrous deals Serge Savard had made before he and Jacques Demers were fired and replaced by Regine Houle and Mario Tremblay in October 1995. Pat was right. By the time Savard was fired some 16 months after winning that Stanley Cup, the team had pretty much been dismantled through a series of bad deals made by Savard himself. The Canadiens began the 1995-96 season with only 7 holdovers from the championship team. J.J. Dagno was dealt before the Roy trade, after which there were only 4 left. There's more to the long Stanley Cup drought than mistakes made by an individual GM or group of GMs, just as there was more to winning it in the first place. It's now a 31-team league, soon to be 32. The odds are now tougher. There were 17 teams when the Canadiens concluded their last dynasty run in 1979, 24 when the Habs won in 1993, the Canadiens won in 1986 with Gene Perron behind the bench, the Kings made the final in '93 with Barry Melrose coaching. That doesn't happen anymore. Every one of the 16 teams in the playoffs this year had a coach who was at least solid if not a spectacular. There are fewer real patsies around the league, teams with incompetent GMs or coaches or both just waiting to be fleeced. Of course, the drought doesn't simply involve the Canadiens. No other Canadian team has won since 1993. We told Canadian teams face more handicaps, with high taxes and sometimes atrocious weather, but that's more excuse than reality. Pricey free agents might be turned off, but if they live here year-round, the exchange rate makes up for most of what they lose in taxes. And the Winnipeg Jets, the best of the Canadian teams, were essentially built without free agents. If nothing else, Winnipeg proved it's still possible for a Canadian team to win it all. With a few breaks, they might have accomplished the feat this spring. What you have to do is to build a solid team, hire a good competent coach, and hope things go your way, as they did for the Canadiens in 1986 and 1993. The loyal and often hysterical Canadiens fan base has waited 25 years now for that elusive 25th Stanley Cup. If and when the team wins another one, there will be few left around who can recall what the usual parade route really was. And at this rate, it may take another 25 years. JackTodd46 at yahoo.com, twitter.com/JackTodd46.